The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Redemption Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1878, but it wasn't the sound that made Violet Calloway's heart stop, it was what followed. Her father's body crumpled to the ground, blood pooling beneath him like spilled whiskey on a saloon floor. Within hours, the town council had decided her fate. To pay for her father's gambling debts, she would be sold at auction like cattle to the highest bidder. Standing on the wooden platform in the town square, wrists bound with rough rope that bit into her skin, Violet fought back tears as men leered and shouted vulgar amounts. 22 years of life, and this was how it would end, not as a person, but as property. $500, a gruff voice called from the back of the crowd, silencing the raucous bidding. The sea of dusty cowboys parted to reveal a tall man with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. And that'll be the end of this shameful business. Cole Anderson pushed his way forward, spurs jingling with each deliberate step. The town sheriff's deputy knew him as a rancher from the North Valley, quiet, hardworking, and fair. Unlike most men in these parts, Cole rarely came to town except for supplies and never participated in its seedier entertainments. "Mr. Anderson," the auctioneer stammered, "we have other interested parties." "I said $500, Cole repeated, placing a leather pouch heavy with coins on the platform, "which is more than enough to cover what's owed." His eyes met Violet's for the first time, and something passed between them, not pity as she expected, but quiet rage at her circumstance. This woman deserves a wedding, not a sale. The crowd murmured as Cole stepped up onto the platform, removing his hat in a gesture of respect before addressing Violet directly. "Miss Calloway, I have no intention of owning you. My offer is this: safety at my ranch until you decide your own path forward." He spoke softly so only she could hear. "You may leave whenever you wish or stay on as paid help. The choice will be yours alone." Violet's legs nearly buckled beneath her. After days locked in the town jail, awaiting this humiliation, freedom seemed like a cruel joke. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." "I know enough," Cole replied, his jawline tightening. "I know that no person should be treated as merchandise, and I know that Redemption Creek seems to have forgotten its name." The auctioneer cleared his throat nervously. "Well, if there are no higher bids." "There better not be," Cole said, his voice carrying a steel edge that made several men step back. And so it was that Violet Calloway found herself in the back of a wagon, headed toward the distant mountains and an uncertain future with a stranger whose moral compass seemed to point truer than most. The town disappeared behind them as Cole's horses maintained a steady pace along the rutted trail. They traveled in silence for nearly an hour before Violet found her voice again. "My father, will they bury him properly?" Cole glanced over his shoulder. "I paid for that too, a proper plot in the cemetery, not the pauper's field." Fresh tears sprang to Violet's eyes. Her father had been a flawed man, quick to drink, quicker to gamble, and quickest to make promises he couldn't keep, but he had been her only family since her mother died of consumption 8 years ago. "Thank you," she whispered, "though I don't know how I'll ever repay such kindness." "It's not kindness that needs repayment," Cole said firmly. "It's basic decency, something that town seems to have in short supply." As they crested a hill, Cole's ranch came into view, a sturdy 2-story house with a wide porch, several outbuildings and grazing cattle dotting the surrounding pastures. It wasn't the largest spread in the territory, but it was well maintained, speaking to the owner's diligence. "It's not much," Cole said, misreading her silence for disappointment, "but it's peaceful." "It's beautiful," Violet replied honestly. After years of rented rooms above saloons and cramped quarters in boarding houses, as her father drifted from town to town chasing elusive fortunes, the ranch looked like something from a dream. A young boy of perhaps 16 ran out to meet them, followed by an older man with a limp. Cole introduced them as Jimmy, the ranch hand's son who helped with chores, and Elijah, his foreman who'd worked the land with him for 5 years. "Miss Calloway will be staying with us," Cole explained simply, offering no further details about the circumstances. Both men nodded without question, though Violet caught Elijah giving his boss a knowing look. "I'll show you to your room," Cole said, helping her down from the wagon with gentle hands that betrayed his strength. "You must be exhausted." The bedroom was simple but clean, with a real bed, not just a straw mattress, and a window overlooking the mountains. On the dresser sat a pitcher and basin, and someone had placed wildflowers in a jar beside them. "These are Mrs. Elijah's touches," Cole explained, seeing her surprise at the flowers. "She comes up from their cabin a few times a week to help with the house. She insisted any lady staying here should have flowers to welcome her." "It's more than I deserve," Violet said softly. Cole's expression hardened. "No, it's exactly what you deserve to be treated as a person of value." He cleared his throat. "Rest now. Tomorrow will be soon enough to figure things out." After he left, Violet sank onto the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. She had gone from condemned to sold to rescued in the span of hours. The tears came freely now for her father, for herself, for the shame of standing on that auction block, and for the unexpected kindness of this stranger who asked nothing in return. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. This room was too nice, the bed too comfortable to be another rented space above a saloon. Then the memories flooded back and she sat up quickly. Someone had left a dress draped over the chair, simple but clean and roughly her size. A note pinned to it read, "Mrs. Elijah thought you might need this. Breakfast when you're ready." It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was strong and precise, much like its author. Downstairs, she found Cole at the kitchen table with a ledger open before him. He stood when she entered, offering a polite nod. "You slept 14 hours, he said, pouring her coffee without asking. "You must have needed it." "I haven't slept properly in weeks," Violet admitted, accepting the mug gratefully. "Not since they took my father's body and locked me up." Cole's expression darkened. That shouldn't have happened. Sheriff Daggett's always been more interested in pleasing the town council than upholding the law. "The law," Violet repeated bitterly. "The law said a daughter inherits her father's debts. The law allowed them to sell me." "No proper law says that," Cole countered. "Those men twisted justice to suit themselves. It's happened before." Something in his tone made Violet look up sharply. "You've seen this before." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "My mother was sold to pay my father's debts when I was 8. A mining town in Colorado. Different place, same injustice." He poured himself more coffee. "She died within a year, working in conditions no human should endure." The revelation hung between them, explaining more than words could about why he'd intervened at the auction. "I'm sorry," Violet said softly. "It was a long time ago," Cole replied, though his eyes suggested the wound remained fresh. "What matters is breaking that cycle of cruelty." He pushed a plate of food toward her. "Eat, then we can discuss what happens next." Violet hadn't realized how hungry she was until she started eating. Between bites, she studied Cole more carefully. He was older than her, perhaps 30, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent years under the western sun. His hands bore calluses and small scars, telling the story of a life built through hard work rather than luck or inheritance. "You mentioned I could stay as paid help," she said finally. "What kind of work did you have in mind?" "Whatever suits your abilities," Cole answered. "Can you cook?" "Passably. Read and figure? Better than most, I'd wager. My mother was a schoolteacher before she married my father. She made sure I learned my letters and numbers properly." Cole nodded approvingly. "Good, the ranch books could use a proper keeping." "Elijah's wife helps with the cooking and cleaning, but she's getting on in years. Having someone younger to assist would be welcome." He hesitated. "Of course, if you'd rather move on once you've earned some money, that's your choice. Cheyenne's not too far, about 3 days' ride. You might find better opportunities there." "Why are you doing this?" Violet asked suddenly. Truly, most men would have. She stopped, unable to finish the thought. "I'm not most men," Cole said simply, "and I believe people deserve second chances." He stood, clearing his dishes. "Take today to rest. Tomorrow, if you're willing, Mrs. Elijah can show you around the house and what needs doing." True to his word, Cole demanded nothing from Violet that first day. She spent it exploring the house and immediate surroundings, careful not to stray too far. The ranch was larger than it had first appeared, with good water from a creek that ran down from the mountains and enough grazing land to support a respectable herd. The next morning, Mrs. Elijah arrived, a stout woman in her 60s with kind eyes and work-worn hands. She welcomed Violet without prying questions, showing her the rhythm of the household with patient instruction. "Mr. Anderson's a good man," she said as they kneaded bread dough together. "Keeps to himself mostly, but fair to all who work for him. Pays on time and never raises his voice, even when things go wrong." "How long has he had this ranch?" Violet asked, curious about the man who had saved her from a fate she could scarcely bear to contemplate, going on 8 years now. "Came here with nothing but determination and some savings from working other men's cattle. Built most of this place with his own 2 hands." Mrs. Elijah punched down her dough with surprising strength. "Never seen him show interest in town gatherings or socializing. Some folks whisper he's running from something, but I say a man's past is his own business." Over the next few weeks, Violet settled into a routine. She helped Mrs. Elijah with cooking and cleaning, learned to manage the household supplies, and began organizing Cole's haphazard bookkeeping. The work was honest and straightforward, leaving her too tired at night to dwell on painful memories. Cole himself remained something of a mystery. He worked from dawn until dusk, often eating quickly before retiring to his study or making evening rounds of the property. He was unfailingly polite, but maintained a careful distance that Violet both appreciated and, increasingly, found herself wishing he would bridge. One evening, nearly a month after her arrival, Violet was returning from the chicken coop with a basket of eggs when she heard music drifting from the barn. Curious, she followed the sound and found Cole sitting on a hay bale, playing a harmonica with his eyes closed. The melody was haunting and beautiful, not a jaunty saloon tune, but something that spoke of longing and memory. She must have made some small noise, for his eyes opened suddenly, and he lowered the instrument with an embarrassed expression. "I'm sorry," Violet said quickly. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't," Cole replied, gesturing for her to enter. "I just don't usually have an audience." "It was beautiful," she said, stepping into the warm, hay-scented space. "I didn't know you played. My mother taught me long ago." He turned the harmonica over in his hands. It was hers, one of the few things I have left of her. Violet sat on another hay bale across from him. "Would you tell me about her?" For a moment, she thought he might refuse. But then Cole began speaking, his voice low and measured as he described a woman of gentle strength who sang while she worked and taught him to read by lamplight after long days of labor. As he spoke, Violet began to understand the man before her, how he'd been shaped by loss and injustice, yet chosen compassion rather than bitterness. "She would have liked you," Cole said finally, surprising them both with the personal observation. "Why do you say that?" She admired resilience. "You've faced terrible circumstances with dignity." His gray eyes met hers directly. "I've seen how hard you work, how you've made a place for yourself here without complaint. You've given me every reason to try," Violet replied honestly. "When I stood on that auction platform, I thought my life was over. Instead, I found—" "Found what?" Cole prompted when she hesitated. "A chance to discover who I might be when I'm not just Jacob Calloway's daughter, the girl always moving from town to town, always one step ahead of creditors or angry gamblers." Cole nodded, understanding in his expression. "We are more than the shadows our parents cast, though it can take a lifetime to realize it." He stood, offering her a hand up. "It's getting late. We should head back to the house." Their hands remained linked perhaps a moment longer than necessary, and Violet felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear or gratitude. This feeling was newer, more dangerous in its own way, and she quickly withdrew her hand, murmuring goodnight as she hurried back to the safety of the main house. That night, she lay awake long after the lamps were extinguished, replaying the moment in the barn. Cole Anderson had saved her, given her shelter and purpose, asked for nothing in return, and now her foolish heart was developing feelings that could only complicate matters. She resolved to guard herself more carefully, to remember that her position here was precarious, dependent entirely on Cole's continued goodwill. The next day brought unexpected company. Violet was hanging laundry when she heard horses approaching. 3 riders appeared, 2 men and a woman, all well-dressed and clearly not the usual ranch visitors. Cole emerged from the barn to greet them, his posture stiffening in a way Violet had not seen before. "Anderson," the older man called out, dismounting with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed. "We need to talk." Cole nodded curtly. "Judge Harrington, this is a surprise." Violet kept to her task, trying to appear inconspicuous while straining to hear their conversation. The judge was accompanied by his daughter Rebecca, a pretty blonde woman perhaps Violet's age, and a younger man introduced as Thomas Beaumont, whose tailored clothes marked him as Eastern money rather than Western grit. "We've come about the Dawson property," the judge was saying. "Beaumont here is interested in expanding his holdings, and your land would connect his new purchase with the river access he needs." "My land isn't for sale," Cole replied firmly. "As I've told you before." Judge Harrington's pleasant expression hardened slightly. "Be reasonable, Anderson. The offer is more than fair, and frankly, a small operation like yours can't compete with what's coming. Progress doesn't wait for sentimentality." "It's not sentiment, it's my home and livelihood." The conversation grew more heated, with the judge's tone becoming increasingly condescending, while Cole's responses remained measured but unyielding. Throughout the exchange, Violet noticed Rebecca Harrington watching Cole with obvious interest, occasionally touching his arm to emphasize a point or laughing at something that wasn't particularly amusing. Finally, the judge signaled their departure, but not before issuing what sounded suspiciously like a threat. "Consider carefully, Anderson. Water rights in this territory can be complicated. A man without friends in the right places might find himself facing unexpected difficulties." After they rode away, Cole remained standing in the yard, his expression troubled. Violet approached hesitantly. "Is everything all right?" He seemed startled by her presence, as if he'd forgotten she was there. "Just the usual pressure." "Judge Harrington doesn't like being refused, especially by someone he considers beneath his station." "The woman seemed quite taken with you," Violet observed, immediately regretting the personal comment. Surprisingly, Cole laughed. "Rebecca Harrington has been taken with the idea of reforming a rough rancher into a suitable husband for years. The judge encourages it, thinks having me as a son-in-law would make controlling this land easier." He shook his head. "I've made it clear I'm not interested, but subtlety isn't their strong suit." "She's very beautiful," Violet said carefully. "Beauty without kindness holds little appeal," Cole replied, his gaze lingering on Violet's face for a heartbeat longer than usual. "Excuse me. I need to check the north pasture fences before dark." As spring turned to summer, life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Violet's duties expanded as she proved herself capable and trustworthy. She learned to manage the household accounts, to order supplies from town, and even to assist with calving when extra hands were needed. For the first time in her life, she felt useful, even necessary, and the feeling brought a quiet confidence she had never before experienced. Cole, too, seemed to relax around her. Their conversations grew longer and more personal, often continuing after supper as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. He spoke of his dreams for the ranch, of the books he read during the quiet winter months, of his belief that the West could be a place of opportunity for those willing to work honestly. In turn, Violet shared stories of the better parts of her childhood, her mother's lessons, the beauty of the different territories they'd traveled through, the small kindnesses she'd encountered even in the hardest times. She found herself laughing more, the weight of her past growing lighter with each passing day. The change between them did not go unnoticed. One afternoon, as she helped Mrs. Elijah shell peas on the porch, the older woman gave her a knowing look. "Mr. Anderson smiles more these days," she observed. "Hasn't been this at ease since I've known him." Violet concentrated on the peas in her lap. "The cattle prices have been good this season. That would make any rancher smile," Mrs. Elijah snorted. "It's not cattle prices lighting up his face when you walk into a room, child." Her weathered hands continued their steady work. "There's no shame in finding happiness after sorrow. The good Lord knows you both deserve it." "You misunderstand," Violet protested weakly. "I'm just an employee here." "If that's what helps you sleep at night," the older woman replied with a skeptical raise of her eyebrow. "But I've seen the way you look at him when you think no one's watching." Before Violet could form a response, hoofbeats announced a rider approaching at speed. Elijah himself appeared, his normally calm demeanor replaced with urgency as he dismounted. "Mrs. Calloway," he called, "you'd better come quick. The boss took a bad fall checking that new stallion. Jimmy's bringing him back now." Cold fear gripped Violet's heart as she hurried toward the corral. Jimmy was leading Cole's horse, with Cole himself walking slowly beside it, one arm cradled against his chest, his face pale beneath its tan. "I'm fine," he insisted as Violet rushed to his side. "Just a dislocated shoulder and some bruised pride." "You're not fine," she countered, noting the sheen of sweat on his forehead and the tight lines of pain around his mouth. "Elijah, help me get him to the house." What followed was a flurry of activity. Elijah had experience setting dislocated joints from his army days, and with Violet's assistance, they managed to pop Cole's shoulder back into place, a process that drew a single, bitten-off cry of pain from the stoic rancher before he passed out briefly. When he regained consciousness, Violet was bathing his forehead with a cool cloth, her face etched with concern. "Don't you dare do that again," she scolded, relief making her voice sharper than intended. "What were you thinking, working that stallion alone?" "Wasn't thinking," Cole admitted groggily. "That's usually when trouble finds me." His uninjured hand captured hers, stopping her ministrations. "You were worried." It wasn't a question, but Violet answered anyway. "Of course I was worried. We all depend on you here." Something shifted in Cole's expression, a softening, a recognition. "Violet," he said quietly, using her given name for the first time, "I think we need to talk about what's happening between us." Her heart hammered in her chest. "This isn't the time, you need rest." "I've waited long enough," Cole insisted, struggling to sit up. "Too long, maybe, please," Violet whispered, suddenly afraid not of him but of the vulnerability his words threatened to expose in her. "Not like this, not when you're hurt and I'm when you're what? When I'm still not sure who I am or what I have to offer anyone." The admission cost her, but it was true. These months of safety had begun to heal old wounds, but the woman who had stood on that auction block still shadowed her thoughts. Cole's expression softened with understanding. "All right," he conceded, settling back against the pillows. "But this conversation isn't finished, just postponed." The following days brought an unexpected reversal of roles. With Cole temporarily limited by his injury, Violet found herself taking on more responsibility around the ranch. She rode out with Jimmy to check fences, learned the basics of cattle management from Elijah, and handled business correspondence that couldn't wait for Cole's recovery. For his part, Cole proved to be a terrible patient, restless, stubborn, and determined to do more than the doctor who'd been summoned from town had advised. Only Violet's firm insistence kept him from undoing his recovery with premature exertion. "You're worse than a bear with a thorn," she complained one evening, finding him attempting to chop wood one-handed. She took the axe from him despite his protests. "The ranch won't fall apart if you rest for a week." "I'm not used to sitting idle while others work," Cole admitted, watching as she expertly split a log with a clean stroke. "Perhaps you should get used to delegating," Violet suggested, setting up another piece of wood. "You've built something good here, but you don't have to carry the weight alone." He studied her as she worked, admiration plain in his expression. "You've changed since you came here. For better or worse?" she asked lightly, though the question carried real weight for her. "Definitely better." "You walk taller, speak your mind more freely." He stepped closer, taking the axe gently from her hands. "The frightened woman from that auction platform is gone." Their faces were inches apart now, and Violet could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes, feel the warmth of his breath on her cheek. For a breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her, wanted him to, with an intensity that startled her. Instead, a distant call from Elijah broke the spell, and Cole stepped back, clearing his throat. "We should head in. Looks like rain coming." The postponed conversation between them remained unspoken, but ever present in the charged air between them. Every accidental touch, every shared look across the dinner table, every moment alone together seemed to vibrate with words unsaid. Then came the day that changed everything. Violet was in town picking up supplies, a task she'd taken over during Cole's recovery, when she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "Harrington's got it all arranged," a man was saying to his companion outside the general store. "Anderson's land will be underwater once they divert the creek. Judge has already signed the papers giving Beaumont the water rights. Seems underhanded," his companion replied. "Anderson's worked that land honest for years. That's progress for you. Small ranchers can't fight the big money coming in." The man spat tobacco juice onto the street. "Heard they're sending the notice today. Anderson will have to sell or lose everything when his cattle have no water." Violet abandoned her shopping and rode back to the ranch at a dangerous pace. She found Cole in the barn, his arm now healed enough for light work, brushing down his horse. "They're stealing your water," she blurted without preamble, dismounting in a rush. "Judge Harrington and Beaumont, they've diverted the creek rights. You need to do something." Cole's expression hardened as she related what she'd overheard. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. "I suspected something like this," he finally said. "Harrington's been too confident lately." He set down the brush and strode toward the house. "I need to ride into Cheyenne, see a lawyer I know there. This isn't over yet." "I'm coming with you," Violet declared, following him. Cole turned, surprised. "It could be dangerous. Harrington has influence throughout the territory. All the more reason you shouldn't go alone." She met his gaze steadily. "This is my home too now, Cole. I'll fight for it alongside you." Something shifted in his expression at her words, a softening, a recognition of what she was really saying. This wasn't just about water rights or land, it was about belonging, about choosing to stand with him when it mattered. "Pack what you need," he said finally. "We leave at first light." The journey to Cheyenne took 3 days of hard riding. They stayed at roadhouses along the way. Cole always careful to secure separate rooms and maintain propriety despite the gossip their traveling together inevitably generated. Each evening, they discussed strategy, Cole explaining the complexities of territorial water rights and the political connections they would be challenging. "My lawyer friend, Daniel Whitfield, helped several small ranchers fight similar battles," Cole explained as they sat by a campfire on the final night of their journey. "He understands how to navigate the territorial courts, and if legal means fail," Violet asked quietly. Cole's expression was grim in the firelight. "Then we have harder choices to make, but let's cross that bridge if we come to it." They reached Cheyenne the following afternoon, a bustling frontier city that made Redemption Creek look like the tiny outpost it was. Cole led them directly to a modest office on a side street, where Daniel Whitfield greeted them warmly despite their unannounced arrival. The lawyer, a slender man with spectacles and prematurely gray hair, listened intently as they explained the situation, occasionally making notes or asking pointed questions. When they finished, he removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "It's a clear case of corrupt influence," he said finally. "Unfortunately, proving that in court is another matter. Judge Harrington has carefully maintained the appearance of legality." "So there's nothing we can do?" Violet asked, dismayed. "I didn't say that." Whitfield's eyes twinkled with sudden mischief. "Sometimes fighting corruption requires creative approaches. Cole, remember the Patterson case last year?" Cole nodded slowly, understanding dawning. "The newspaper exposé?" "Exactly. The territorial governor can't ignore public scandal, even from his friends. And I happen to know a newspaperman who specializes in uncovering inconvenient truths." What followed was 3 days of intensive work. While Whitfield prepared legal documents challenging the water rights decision, Cole and Violet met with James Hollister, editor of the Cheyenne Daily Telegraph. The crusading journalist was immediately intrigued by their story, particularly when they provided evidence of similar land grabs Harrington had orchestrated against other small ranchers. "This fits a pattern," Hollister said, reviewing their documentation. I've been collecting information on the judge for months, but never had enough to publish. Your case might be the final piece I needed. Meanwhile, Violet discovered an unexpected talent for investigation. Her years moving through frontier communities with her father had taught her to observe carefully and remember details. She recalled names her father had mentioned, transactions he'd witnessed, and connections between powerful men throughout the territory. "You're remarkable," Cole told her one evening as they reviewed notes in Whitfield's office. "Most people in your situation would have crumbled, but you've turned your difficult past into a strength." "I had a good teacher in survival," Violet replied with a small smile. "And a better one in reclaiming dignity." She reached across the table to touch his hand. "Thank you for showing me I could be more than my circumstances." The moment between them deepened, the air charged with unspoken feelings. Cole turned his hand to clasp hers, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her wrist. "Violet, when this is over," the door opened abruptly as Whitfield returned with fresh coffee and they pulled apart, the moment broken but not forgotten. On their fourth day in Cheyenne, Hollister published the first in a series of articles exposing Judge Harrington's systematic abuse of power. The piece detailed how the judge had manipulated water rights to force small landowners to sell to his associates, often at a fraction of their property's value. Cole's case featured prominently alongside testimonies from other ranchers who had lost their land through similar tactics. The effect was immediate and dramatic. By midday, the territorial governor's office had sent a representative to meet with Whitfield. By evening, a telegram arrived announcing the temporary suspension of all water rights decisions made by Judge Harrington pending a full investigation. "It's not victory yet," Whitfield cautioned as they celebrated in his office, "but it's a significant first step. The governor can't ignore this level of public outcry, not in an election year." They returned to the ranch a week later, cautiously optimistic but prepared for retaliation. They didn't have to wait long. 2 days after their return, Rebecca Harrington arrived unaccompanied, a breach of propriety that spoke to her agitation. Violet answered the door, surprising their visitor who clearly expected to find Cole alone. "I need to speak with Mr. Anderson," Rebecca said coldly, barely acknowledging Violet's presence. Cole joined them in the entryway, his expression carefully neutral. "Miss Harrington, this is unexpected." "As unexpected as your betrayal," she snapped. "My father has been humiliated. His reputation is in tatters because of your accusations." "They aren't accusations if they're true," Cole replied evenly. "Your father abused his position to steal from honest ranchers. I merely helped bring those facts to light." Rebecca's composure cracked. "He was trying to help you. To bring you into our family, to give you the connections you need to truly succeed here." Her gaze shifted to Violet, contempt evident. "Instead, you choose to side with what is she to you exactly, the town auction girl." Violet felt the familiar shame trying to take hold, but Cole's next words stopped it cold. "Miss Calloway is the woman I intend to marry if she'll have me," he said with quiet dignity. "And I'd appreciate you showing her the respect she deserves." Both women stared at him in shock. Rebecca recovered first, her face flushing with anger and embarrassment. "You're making a terrible mistake. My father won't forget this." "Neither will the governor, I imagine," Cole replied. "Good day, Miss Harrington." After she'd gone, silence hung heavy between them. Violet's heart hammered in her chest, her mind struggling to process what Cole had said. "Did you mean that?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Cole turned to face her fully, all pretense of distance gone from his expression. "Not how I planned to ask, but yes, every word." He took her hands in his. "I've wanted to speak for months, but I needed you to find your footing first, to know your own mind. And now," Violet's voice trembled slightly, "now I'm asking properly." He knelt before her, still holding her hands. "Violet Calloway, I love you. Not out of pity or obligation, but because you're the strongest, most remarkable woman I've ever known. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision as everything inside her aligned with perfect clarity. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "yes." He stood and pulled her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. When they finally parted, both breathless, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "I've waited so long to do that," he murmured. "Why did you wait?" She asked, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw in wonder. "I needed you to know you had choices, that you weren't trading one form of obligation for another." His eyes held hers intently. "Your freedom matters to me, Violet, always will." The fight for Cole's land continued through the summer, but with public opinion turned against Judge Harrington and the governor's investigation underway, the outcome seemed increasingly certain. By August, Whitfield sent word that the water rights had been officially restored to their original status, and Harrington himself had been removed from the bench pending further review of his past decisions. They were married in September, with the mountains aflame in autumn colors. The ceremony was small but joyful. Elijah and his wife, Jimmy and his family, Daniel Whitfield, who had become a friend as well as an ally, and even James Hollister, who had traveled from Cheyenne to witness the union he'd helped make possible. Violet wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Elijah had helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair instead of an expensive veil. Cole looked at her as though she were the most precious thing he had ever seen, his voice steady and sure as he spoke his vows. "From this day forward, you are not owned or bound but freely chosen and deeply loved," he promised, his words carrying special meaning for them both. "Whatever comes, we face it together." As the years passed, the ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. Violet's head for business complemented Cole's practical knowledge of the land, and together they built something neither could have achieved alone. They added rooms to the house as their family grew, first a daughter with her mother's spirit and her father's steadfast heart, then twin boys who brought equal measures of joy and chaos to the household. Judge Harrington eventually faced justice for his corruption, though he avoided prison through political connections and instead retreated to Denver in disgrace. Rebecca married Thomas Beaumont and moved east, seemingly content with the wealth and status the match provided. Sometimes, on summer evenings when the work was done, Cole would take out his harmonica and play the old songs his mother had taught him. Violet would sit beside him on the porch swing, their children gathered around, and think about the strange and winding path that had brought her here, how the worst day of her life had ultimately led to her greatest happiness. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked one such evening, pausing in his playing. Violet smiled, watching their children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. "I was thinking about that day in Redemption Creek, about what you said on the auction platform." Cole's arm tightened around her shoulders. "That you deserved a wedding, not a sale?" "Yes." She leaned into his embrace. "You gave me so much more than that. You gave me the chance to find myself." "You did that part on your own," he corrected gently. "I just provided the space." Their oldest child, 7-year-old Elizabeth, climbed onto the porch and settled against her father's knee. "Tell the story again, Papa, about how you rescued Mama." Cole and Violet exchanged a smile, the shared history between them rich with meaning. "Well," Cole began, setting aside his harmonica, "it wasn't exactly a rescue, more like two people finding each other when they needed it most." As twilight deepened into night, Cole's voice wove their history for their children, not a tale of victimhood and salvation, but one of courage, justice, and love that had flourished against all odds in the unforgiving landscape of the West. For Violet, listening to the familiar story with her family gathered close, the painful memories of that auction platform had lost their sting, transformed by time and love into the beginning of a journey rather than an ending. Later, after the children were asleep and they had retired to their room, Violet stood by the window, gazing at the moonlit mountains that had become as familiar to her as her own reflection. "No regrets?" Cole asked softly, joining her. "Not one," she answered truthfully, turning into his embrace. "Every step, even the painful ones, led me here, led me to you." Outside, the Wyoming wind whispered through the cottonwoods, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called to its mate, wild and free, belonging completely to the land and to each other. Just as they did, just as they always would.